Okay. Well, good morning to all of you. Now, in yesterday's class, we were talking about the refinement of or ideas of John Stuart Mill. That how did John Stuart Mill try to improve upon the ideas of Jeremy Bentham, the original utilitarian philosopher. So, we had seen yesterday that John Stuart Mill tried to bring about three important changes in the classical theory of utilitarianism. First was, we had seen that in detail yesterday, that was the idea of rule utilitarianism. So, rule must be the basis of morality of an action. But one thing that we have talked about, important significant thing from that topic, that rules can have an exception. So, sometimes it is okay for us to make an exception to rule, bend a rule or violate a rule also, to break the rule also in order to achieve a larger purpose, better consequence maybe. But that should be done only as an exception, one time exception. The second thing that I had just mentioned yesterday, that most important contribution of John Stuart Mill in the moral philosophy was this one, which we will discuss in much detail in our class today, and that was the idea of liberty. So, second important idea, it is because of this idea of liberty that John Stuart Mill is considered to be one of the fathers of modernity, as I told you yesterday. So, this idea of liberty is so strongly associated with John Stuart Mill that anybody who knows about Mill, that person must have heard about the idea of liberty somehow. The moment you take the name of Mill, then first word that comes in the mind of a person is liberty. Mill, liberty, this is what people say. So, let us see what is that idea of liberty that Mill tried to propound. So, write down firstly, according to Mill, the most important rule of utilitarianism, is the respect for individual liberty. Every individual, write down further, every individual should have the complete liberty to do whatever he or she wants. Every individual should have the complete liberty to do whatever he wants, unless and until he does not interfere into the he or she does not interfere into the similar liberty of someone else. It does not interfere into the similar liberty of someone else. So, that is how we can start our discussion of liberty. The idea is that he says that every individual in the society should have a complete liberty to do whatever that person wants, with a single restriction, that liberty of one person should not interfere into the liberty of somebody else. That is the only criteria on which the liberty of a person can be restricted, can be curtailed, can be taken away. What we mean here is something like this. Suppose, for example, there is a person called A, me, you or anybody. Then Mill will say that around us we have a certain area of influence, certain space around us. Physical space where we can move around, moral space where we can make decision, or behavioral space where we can implement our decision. So, we have certain space around us, physical space, moral space or behavioral space. Now, within that space, whatever we are doing, I am doing is right, and outside that space, whatever I may do would be wrong. So, in the literature of liberty, we do not define any action as right and wrong. We only define the space, the area. that within that area, everything that a person does is right. There is no wrong exists within that. Wrong exists only outside that area. Within that area, there is always right. So we create a boundary, we create a limit. Within that limit, everything, within that boundary, everything is right, and without that boundary, everything is wrong. So in Hindi also, as we say often, Adhikar Kshetra. Kshetra means what? Area. So within my area, well, whatever I am doing is right. Now, whether my space and whether does my space end? Well, my space ends where a similar space of somebody else begins. Suppose there is another person called B. Now that person also has certain space around him. So within that space, whatever that person is doing right, but outside that space will be wrong for that person. So the moment this person's space begins, that is the point where my space actually ends. So for example, according to Mill, I can go, suppose this is me, then I can go that far, but not farther than that, because if I go farther than that, then I will interfere into the area of the other person. That will make my action wrong. This person can go that far, but not farther than that, because if he does so, then well, he will interfere into my area. That will make his action wrong. So as long as I am not entering into his area, or that person is not entering into my area, then whatever I am doing is right, and whatever that person is doing is equally right. So that is where the limit actually comes up. You must have heard there is a famous quotation in the literature of liberty that the limit of my hand is where your nose begins. This is what people often say. So I have a right to flex my hand like this one. Well, you have no right to tell me, sir, don't do that, it does not look nice. If it does not look nice, close your eyes. Don't look at me. But I have a right to flex my hand, but I must stop. Where should I stop? Where your nose begins. Now it is your nose, that is your area, I must restrict myself. I should not proceed further in that direction. So the limit of my hand is where your nose begins. That is what we often call about the limit. And this limitation he himself defined in a very clear language. He said that this limitation on the liberty can be put only and only when there is a harm to the other person by the act done by this person. We often call in philosophy that as harm principle. Harm principle. So harm principle basically means that my liberty can be curtailed only and only when my action creates a physical harm to somebody else. They do not accept the sentimental or the mental harm as such. Only physical harm is the criteria on the basis of which the liberty of a person can be restricted, liberty of the person can be curtailed. Apart from that, and physical harm to somebody else, not to the self. We will talk about that also in the next class. So this is what Mill will say, that only that is the ground on which liberty of a person can be restricted, can be curtailed, can be limited. Otherwise, there is no legitimate ground on which we can limit the liberty of a person. That is the idea of liberty that he was talking about here. Now, suppose for example there is a society. Suppose in that society 99% people believe in something. 99% people believe in something, same thing maybe, that they have the same religion, same beliefs, same rituals, same practices, same lifestyle, same food habits, same clothes, same fashion. Everything is more or less similar, a very cohesive society, a very happy society, a very good society. So, normally we remain happier when we are living with the people who are similar to us. So, this society is very happy otherwise because everybody is similar to each other, very cohesive society, harmonious one. But suppose in this society, there is small minority, just 1% people who are very different from the majority. Their belief, their rituals, their religion, their God, their practices, their lifestyle, their food habits, etc., etc., is very different from each other. So different from the majority that the majority who is otherwise so happy, the moment they think about these people, then they are full of the disgust and often how bad these people are. So the presence of 1% people is creating a lot of offense on the 99% people who are otherwise so happy. Now suppose for example there is a proposal in that society that in order to make the society happier, let us kill these 1% people because their presence is creating so much of unhappiness among the majority. So let's kill those people, let us put them in jail, let us put them in concentration camp, throw them into the Bay of Bengal or send them to Pakistan, Syria, wherever they want to. In India, Many people are sent to Pakistan every other day nowadays. So send them to Pakistan, don't allow them to live in our country. If you do so, will that be the right thing to do? What do you think a Bentham will say about that? Well, I hope that you can figure it out. Bentham will not be in favor of killing 1% people. That will create a lots of pain, lots of unhappiness. But at least in theoretical condition, Bentham might possibly say that the total pain created for these 1% people, if that is less than the total happiness for the 99% people, then at least in theory, well, we can banish these people, you can compromise their happiness, their rights, their, well, lifestyle maybe. So Bentham may possibly agree in some extreme theoretical condition at least, but Mill will say that no, that is wrong, we should not do that. Why not? Because if you do so, then we will be violating the liberty of that 1%. Liberty of that 1% per individual people is as important as the liberty of the 99% people. So forget about 1%. 1% can be a large number. In a country like India, 1% can be millions of people. So forget about 1% people. Just think about it. Suppose one person, a single individual, he does something like, for example, suppose he writes a book. Suppose he writes a book. Now, suppose this book is creating a lots of offense among the 1 billion people in the country. You know, Salman Rushdie wrote a book called Satanic Verses that created a lots of offense among many Muslims, and because of that, this book was banned in India and many other countries also. So, suppose for example, he writes a book. In many examples, you can find out such a book that has been banned because it was creating a lots of offense among the large number of people. So, if this person is writing a book that is creating a very strong offense among 1 billion people in the country, then can that be the ground on which we can violate the liberty of these, we can ban this book? Mill will say that no, you should not do that, that will be unethical. Why so? Because this person is just writing a book, he is not harming anybody. Remember, he does not violate the harm principle, he is not harming somebody, he is just writing a book. So, Mill will say that if you are suppose offended by this book of this person, then well, instead of harming that person or banning his book, you can exercise your own liberty. You have your own liberty to exercise. What are the liberties that you have? Mill will say that in this situation you have 3 liberties. You don't like this book, then you have 3 liberties there. What are these 3 liberties that you have? Well, first liberty that you have is that you can, if you don't like that book, simply don't read it. Throw that into the garbage, throw that into the dustbin. Nobody is forcing you to read a book. Why do you read a book that is bad and then after get offended? So, if you are reading a book, suppose 500 pages book, and in order to get offended, are you not taking too much of effort in order to get offended? It is your problem then. So, Mill will say that if you don't like that book, throw that in garbage, don't read it. So, that is the first liberty that you have, simplest thing that you can do. You have a second liberty also. What is the second liberty? Second liberty can be that, suppose for example, you are very much offended by this book, then you can write reviews against that book. This book, you can tell people that this book is such a bad book, and if the people will agree with your review, your opinion, then well, nobody will read that book. That will automatically be, a book will be out of the market. You don't have to ban it. So you have second liberty that you can write reviews against that book. You can tell others that this book is a bad book. You can advertise against that book. That is what you can do. You have a third liberty also. And what is that third liberty? Suppose for example, you do not like this book and you are an intellectual person yourself, then as a response to that book, you can write your own book also. There is a famous quotation in the literature of liberty, all of you must have heard maybe, that response to a book must be another book. Response to a book should not be a gun. So if somebody is writing a book and you take a gun in your hand to, kill that person, then is that morally justified? Of course not. Book must be countered by a book, an idea must be countered by an idea, guns may be countered by a gun. So if somebody is taking gun against you, then you can legitimately take gun in your hand to kill that person. But if somebody is just writing a book and you take a gun in your hand to kill that person, then that is unethical. So in this case, instead of asking that person not to write a book or ban his book, you can write your own book or do any other things and all. Suppose for example, this one person makes a film. Padmavati is a good example of that. Lots of controversy was there about Padmavat a few years ago. Now, if you do not like that film, Mill will say, suppose there are many people who protested strongly against that people like Carney Sena members and all. So they strongly oppose this film again. Now Mill will say that if you do not like that film, then again you have your own liberty. What are the liberties that you have? The same three liberty. That if you don't like that film, then simply don't watch it. Why are you paying money to watch a film and then get offended? So that is a very stupid thing to do. Don't watch it. Second liberty that you have is that you can tell people that this film is a bad film. You can write reviews against that film. That is second thing that you can do. And well, if people will agree with your opinion, then nobody will watch it. The film will become flop on its own. You have a third liberty also, that if you are an artistic person yourself, then as a response to this film, you can make your own film also. In that case, we'll have two Padmavati, 2 evening of entertainment. We will be culturally rich. So that will be a better thing to do. So if somebody is making a film and you try to take a gun in your hand to harm those people who are making it or ban it, then that will be unethical. So any other example you can take. Somebody makes a painting, for example. Somebody makes a painting, for example, like M.F. Hussain was a good example of that. He made many paintings that created much offense among many Hindus. And because of that, so much of threat was given to him in India that towards the end of his life, he left India, he went to Qatar, and there he died at very old age. Now, Mill will say that is unethical. Just because somebody is writing, he is not forcing. So just because somebody is making a painting that you don't like is not the ground on which you can harm that person, you can kill that person, you can throw that person out of the country. If you don't like his painting, again you have your own choice, that don't watch his painting. He is not forcing you to watch his painting by putting the painting on the, you can say, the public square maybe. So he is just exhibiting his painting in a private space where people pay money to him to watch his painting. So who are we to ask him not to do that again? It is their liberty maybe. Or second liberty that you have, that you can tell people that his paintings are bad painting. Review against that. And third liberty that you have is that if you are a good painter yourself, make your own painting. If your painting is good, people will watch yours and nobody will watch his. So ultimately he will be out of the market maybe. So instead of harming other people for doing something, we should try to exercise what we can do. Any other thing, cartoon for example. So Charlie Hebdo was a good example of in France, where people made certain cartoons. The Charlie Hebdo people made certain cartoon of, can say, offensive cartoon, Prophet Muhammad and all, and because of that, more than 10 people were killed there. Now Mill will say that would be unethical. So any such example that you can take. So any such example that you can cartoon, or somebody makes a documentary, BBC documentary, you know. So any other thing that the person does in that case, according to Mill, well, that is not the ground, because none of these things harm people. So if there is no harm to the other person by the act of a person, then there is no legitimate ground on which, well, we can violate the liberty of that person. You must let that person do whatever that person is doing. Exercise your liberty rather than asking other people. Let us take one small, I think there is some question. Good morning, sir. If utilitarian concept is based on consequence, how is it universal and not relative? Mandeep. Yes, Mandeep, it is a valid question. The utilitarian concept is based on consequence. How is it universal and not relative? It is, I did not say that it is a universal theory, universal in the sense that in every situation we can apply the same principle, that consequence is important. Consequence may change, but this fact that consequence is important is universal. So there is a difference between what is the aspect of universality that we are talking about. The two things are there in this case. First of all, principle, and second one is the actual consequence created. Consequence created may change, but this principle that we have to go into the domain of consequence, that does not change. That is universal. So in this sense, this theory claims to be universal. So I hope that gives you your answer. If all social relations are a contract, then should marriage not be bound by the Contract Act? Well, we will talk about that in a later part, maybe in the next class today by the evening. But yes, short answer is yes. In fact, marriage is actually some special type of contract, not the business contract, but it is actually a type of contract that divorce is basically breakage of that contract maybe. So short answer is yes. Detail we will talk about later. Third question, how can we say that the state of nature is in a state of chaos? Well, you may not say, but Hobbes said so. Many people agree with Hobbes that if state of nature actually appears to be a chaotic space. Just imagine a situation, suppose you are in Kolkata and for one day the police is removed from the society. Everybody knows that there is no police in the society. Don't you think there will be chaos on the roads of Kolkata maybe? There will be chaos in the whole society at that point of time. So the moment police is removed for a day, 100%, there is no force on the road, then within a few hours you will see that there will be chaos on the road. Just look at it when the red light goes on a road and a policeman is not there. Within a few minutes you see there is a chaos on the road. So in such a simple thing, if there can be chaos in minutes maybe, in hours maybe, then if the whole society, if the state of nature comes up, what will be the situation? You can imagine that. So you may not accept that. We'll talk a little more about that in today's class. But Hobbes said so, and many people do agree with Hobbes. We have given some example of that also. That in a state of nature, the number of killing was almost 500,000 and 1,500 per 100,000 population per year. And without outside the state of nature, well, this number was 1, 2, or 3, or 5, or 10 maybe. It is so number of killing is reduced 50 times, 100 times when you can say state of nature is, well, we come out of the state of nature and start living with the government. So we had already talked about that much of evidence for that. Steven Pinker's data, I hope that you remember. Next question, how we have only dealt with the problem of humans, but pleasure and pain are not just human concept. In this concept, is ethics anthropocentric? To a great extent, ethics is anthropocentric, but utilitarian ethics can be extended to the animal that I talked about yesterday. When I was talking about lion, then I briefly mentioned that many utilitarians say that, well, we must consider the pain and pleasure of the animals also. That is why animal ethics is emerging nowadays. But if you remove utilitarian philosophy, now onwards, you see ethics will be completely anthropocentric. Mandeep. This question, Biswajit. As per Mill, France's current situation caused wrong, but according to Bentham, is it right? Is it true? No. According to Bentham, also it is not. Violence may not be justified because that creates lots of pain to the people. So people are, well, killed also, people are burnt, houses burnt. Do you think it will create pleasure overall in the society? So both of them will say it is wrong. Next question. So since we are living in the age of social media and nowadays freedom of speech is a hot topic of gossip. So if an individual posts anything from his user ID, it's his or her liberty, but sometimes it can hurt sentiments of a particular person or community. In that case, harm principle works. No, sentiments does not matter in the case of liberty of Mill, because sentiments are something. So those people whose works are hampered, they can block this user. Social media is not something that is on the road and forcing you to watch. So if you are sentimentally hurt by somebody's tweet, for example, then you can block that person. That facility is there. Isn't it? So, but that does not mean that you can harm that person. He is not harming you. You cannot harm. You should not harm him as well. That is simple principle in that case. So, sentimental harm is no longer the criteria to decide the morality. It is only the physical harm that is there. If sentimental harm is there, you can sentimentally harm that person also rather than banning him. If he is saying something that harms your sentiment, then you have the liberty to say something that harms his sentiments maybe, or strengthen your sentiments maybe, don't get harmed so easily. So that is something that you can do. You can block that person, you can avoid that person, you can simply say right against that person, but that is not the ground on which you can violate the liberty of that person. In this case, how harm principle works? Well, you get the answer. Sometimes it can lead to communal riot as well. No, it cannot lead to communal riot. If it leads to communal riot, then the people who do the riot, they should be put in jail, not the person who wrote the thing. So if I say something and you start doing communal harm, say communal riot, for example, killing people, then whose fault it is? Not my. I'm just speaking. Harming is done by you, so you should be put in jail, not me. So if there is a riot happens, then that person who does the riot, that person should be put in jail, not the person who spoke something. A speech does not harm anybody. So attack and counter attack, again, both can be nasty, but of course physical attack and physical counter attacks are wrong. That should not be done. Otherwise, everything is justified. We'll see a lot of that shortly. We'll get many answers, but this I hope will satisfy you. So These are this is what we are talking about. Now write down a few lines first further. Thus, the liberty of a minority, comma, however small it is, and however offensive distasteful and disgusting, its opinions, beliefs, rituals, practices, etc. Are for the majority, comma, it should not be violated, comma again, however large the majority is. Now I repeat a little longer sentence, but perhaps this captures the whole idea. I repeat, you can revise that. Thus, the liberty of a minority, however small it is, and however offensive, distasteful, and disgusting its opinions, beliefs, rituals, practices, etc. are for the majority, it should not be violated, however large the majority is. So this is what we say, however small the minority is, one person may be, and however offensive his opinions, his rituals, etc. may be for the majority, that should not be violated, however large the majority is. So size of the majority and size of the minority is no longer the question here. It is the liberty. In fact, there is a beautiful quotation of John Stuart Mill, a bit longer quotation, but I will like to talk about here in my own paraphrasing. That will help you to understand what we are, beautifully understand what we are talking about here. He has said, and I am quoting him, he said that suppose there is one person who is doing something which is highly offensive, sentimentally harmful, which is highly offensive to the rest of the humanity. What is the size of humanity today? Well, 8 billion people. So Mill is saying here that if one person, there is one person who is doing something which is highly offensive to 8 billion minus 1 people, then also, and again I am quoting him, then also the rest of the humanity has no right to violate the liberty of that person, as much as this person has no right to violate the liberty of the rest of the humanity if he has power. Now that is an interesting thing. Forget about one person or rest of them. Let us simplify that language. Suppose, for example, this is the minority and suppose this is the majority. So very often it happens that majority, you can say, violates the liberty of the minority because of their number. So majority is large in number, so they often use their numerical strength to violate the liberty of the minority. But sometimes the reverse also happens. Suppose, for example, the minority has lots of power, and because of that power, the minority violates the liberty of the majority. So in every society, this happens normally. That in traditional India, for example, a small group of upper caste people, because they were powerful, they violated the liberty of a large number of lower caste people. Or in Africa, for example, in Europe or America, for example, a small number of white people, they were powerful, so they violated the liberty of a large number of the blacks there. Or in Europe, there are a small number of feudal lords violated the liberty of a large number of feudal serfs, because they were powerful. So powerful people, a small group, may be violating liberty of a large number of majority. Now Mill will say that no, both of them are equally wrong. The majority has no right to violate the liberty of the minority because they are in number, and minority has no right to violate the liberty of a majority because they have power. So number and power both are equally rejected as a way, as a source of violation of the liberty of somebody else. Nobody's liberty should be violated, majority or minority. It is not a question of majority or minority now. It is a question of liberty. Nobody should violate anybody's liberty, whether you are in majority or you are in minority, whether you are numerically strong or whether you have power otherwise. So that is the type of liberty that he was talking about. Now, if you look at this idea till now, then some of you may have thought about it perhaps, that he has rejected the idea of number as the source of violation of liberty. So he has rejected the idea of number. So by rejecting the idea of number, does it not appear that Mill has gone against the basic principle of utilitarianism of Bentham? What was that basic principle? In Bentham theory, as we had seen, that the most important thing was the number, greatest happiness for greatest number. Number was very important in Bentham theory, but now Mill is saying that no, number is no longer important. So it may appear that, well, by rejecting the idea of number, he has gone against his own guru, his own mentor, Jeremy Bentham. But Mill did not think so. Why? That is what we will talk about next. So change the paragraph and then after write further. It may appear that liberty is against the basic principle of utilitarianism. Liberty is against the basic principle of utilitarianism. Remember, when I say basic principle of utilitarianism, then I mean that line that I talked about yesterday, the greatest happiness for greatest number. Greatest happiness for greatest number. So that is what is the basic principle of utilitarianism. So it may appear that liberty is against the basic principle of utilitarianism, but write down further, but Mill did not think so. But Mill did not think so. But Mill did not think so. He believed that liberty is not against utilitarianism. He believed that liberty is not against utilitarianism, but rather it is based on the very same principle itself. But rather it is based on the very same principle itself. But rather it is based on the very same principle itself. Respecting individual liberty will always create greater benefits for the society, in the long run. So this is what he says. He says that this principle that of liberty that he is talking about, it is not against the basic principle of utilitarianism. He says here that this liberty is actually based on the very same principle itself. Because if you respect liberty of somebody, everybody in the society, then it will always create greater benefits for the society in the long term. Maybe in the immediate term, such people like M.F. Hussain or Salman Rushdie are offensive. But in the long term, respecting their liberty is always going to be beneficial for the society. In fact, Mill has written a small booklet I will say, some people call it book also. Name was that On Liberty. So he has written a small book called On Liberty. Now this book is often considered as the Bible of liberty. Anybody who studies liberty philosophically, well, they have always, perhaps they must have, it is an essential reading for such people who try to think about liberty. So this book is often considered to be the most cogent book, most concise and most, you can say, consistent book in the support of individual liberty in the Middle Age, in that age. So if you ask me again to make a list of 100 most influential book in the history, then perhaps I will put On Liberty of Mill as one of them. So extremely influential book in shaping the modern world in a way. A small book but extremely influential. In that book, he had actually made a very conscious effort to understand, to tell us what are the benefits of liberty. Why is it that liberty is such an important thing that we should never compromise on that. So let us talk about what are the arguments that he presented in support of liberty in his book On Liberty. So we will talk about that next. Write down first. Write down further. Change the paragraph and up write further. The following are the benefits of liberty. The following are the benefits of liberty for the society in the long run. Following are the benefits of liberty in the society in the long run. Following are the benefits of liberty in the society in the long run. So we will talk about some important benefit. There can be some question on these points also, that what is the benefit of liberty? Why should we have liberty in the society? So we can use these points along with the examples that we are going to talk about. So let's talk about some of the important benefits of liberty. First one, write down. The dissenting opinion of the minority. The dissenting opinions of the minority may finally, the dissenting opinion of the minority may finally turn out, the dissenting opinion of the, dissenting views of the minority may finally turn out to be true. May finally turn out to be true. If we suppress them in the name of offense, if we suppress them in the name of offense, then if we suppress them in the name of offense, then we will never know the truth. Then we will never know the truth. Now, this is the first important thing that he talks about. Idea here is that he says that the dissenting opinion of the minority, when the minority says something against the majority opinion, then it may appear to be offensive in the short term, but in the long term, that opinion may turn out to be true. If we suppress them just because they are offensive, then we will never know the truth. Truth is more important than the offense. Now, he himself in his book had given many such examples. So, let us take some examples given by him, some others also we will talk. So, he had given first of all the example of Copernicus. Now, you may be aware that before Copernicus, church believed in the Ptolemaic model of universe. So, church's doctrine was that the God created the whole universe in 6 days, and on the 6th day he created human being in his own image and put human being on the earth, and earth at the center of the universe, and the whole universe revolves around the earth. That was the Ptolemaic model, that was the church doctrine. And on the 7th day, of course, God took rest. That's why we should also take rest on the 7th day. We will have an off on the Sunday. So we are taking more rest than God did. So Saturday also. So this is was the Ptolemaic model of universe that church adopted as a doctrine. Now Copernicus made a proposal. This was Ptolemaic model. Church's model was doctrine was called the geocentric model of the universe. Geo, Earth is the center of the whole universe. Now Copernicus made a slightly different proposal. He made a heliocentric proposal of model of the universe. In which case he said that no, Earth is not the center of the universe, Sun is the center of the universe, and the whole universe including Earth revolves around the Sun. Now this was blasphemous, that how can God create us in his own image and put us at the periphery of the universe rather than at the center of the universe. So that appeared to be, well, blasphemous in that case. So strongly offensive this was at that time that the Copernicus did not get, you must be aware that Copernicus throughout was so afraid of the church that throughout his life he did not get the courage to get his books published. His book was published on the last day of his life, the day when he died. We hope that he was able to see the first copy of his book. He died in a hospital, so we believe that he might have seen perhaps the first copy of his book before he died, but his book was not published throughout his life. That offensive his opinion was. Then after, you see that, have you heard the name of Bruno, for example? Many of you may not have heard. Bruno was a great scientist and mathematician of that time. Now Bruno also supported the idea of Copernicus, and because of that, church got so offended that Bruno was burnt alive as on the charge of blasphemy at stake in church. So Bruno was killed. Galileo, on the other hand, when Galileo also supported the Copernicus idea, then Galileo was also put under inquisition. He was not killed because he had some personal contact in church who saved him. But the story is interesting. When the inquisition was going on, then church asked by Galileo that you claim that earth is moving and sun is stationary, but earth appears to be stationary. So prove that earth is moving, and if you are not able to show us that earth is moving, then you will be killed, or otherwise you have to retract from your statement. So on the pressure of the people, he retracted from the statement and he said, okay, I agree with you that earth is stationary and sun is moving, and he was acquitted. Now when he was moving out of the room, then he was a very stubborn person. Story is that he was a very stubborn person. When he was moving out of the room, then he thumped his leg on the ground like this and said, it is still moving. So you force me to say that it is stationary, but earth is still moving. And then he was put under house arrest and he died in house arrest at 88 years of age. But ultimately who was right? Copernicus was right, Bruno was right, and Galileo was right. And church has to change its opinion. Now church accepted the idea of Copernicus after that heliocentric model. After that Kepler came, and Kepler made the proposal that the orbit of the earth around the sun is a circular or elliptical orbit rather than the circular orbit. Now that was also blasphemous, that how can creation of a God be so imperfect like a circle is a perfect shape and ellipse is an imperfect shape. So how can God's creation be so imperfect? God's creation must be perfect, a circle. That was blasphemous, but ultimately who was right? Kepler was right, and church had to change its opinion. So Mill is saying here that if you kill all the Copernicus, if you kill all the Galileo, if you kill all the Keplers, if you kill all the Newtons, then would you ever know the truth about nature? You will never know the truth. So for the sake of truth, let them speak whatever they are speaking, even if what they are speaking appears to be so offensive to the majority. Offense is no ground on which we can violate the liberty of a person, put him in jail or burn that person. So this is what you can find similar example everywhere in India also. At one point of time, 300 years ago in India, well, sati was accepted as a part of Hinduism. Now a small group of minorities led by the people like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, well, they started opposing the church, opposing the sati. Now they were all accused of being anti-Hindu. Raja Ram Mohan Roy, you must have heard that he was accused by many Hindus as being anti-Hindu, that you are trying to kill Hindu. In fact, he was thrown out of his own home by his mother with accusation that you are trying to kill Hinduism. So that was the type of accusation that he has to face. But ultimately, who was right? Well, Raja Ram Mohan Roy was right, and Hindus had to change their opinion. When Gandhi opposed the untouchability in India, then he was also accused of being anti-Hindu, violating the sentiments of the Hindus. But ultimately who was right? Well, Gandhi was right, and Ambedkar was right and Hindus had to change their opinion. When Savitribai Phule or Jyotiba Phule trying to educate the Savitribai Phule, when she was trying to educate the Dalit girls, then she was highly criticized by the Hindus there. He was criticized and harmed also. But ultimately, who was right? They were right. So Mill might possibly say that if you kill all the Raja Ram Mohan Roy, if you kill all the Jyotiba Phule, Savitribai Phule, Gandhi and Ambedkar, etc., can you ever know the truth? What is life? You will never know the truth. So for the sake of truth, let them speak. Because it is often seen that, well, minority, I'm talking about minority, offending minority. We often say that change always begins with the minority. Majority in itself is perhaps incapable of bringing about the change. Why so? Because majority is always happy with their lot. And if you are happy with your lot, you will never change. Remember, change always requires some unhappiness, some dissatisfaction, some you can say unhappiness in some way. So only minorities are unhappy, and because of that they try to initiate a process of change, which is initially offending, later on that becomes the norm. So for the sake of truth, let them speak. Truth is more important than sentiments. So even if the sentiments are being violated, then also for the sake of truth, let them speak. That is the first important argument that he gives in favor of liberty. Second argument is similar to the closer to the first one. Write down further. Sometimes the minority may be partially true. Sometimes the minority may be partially true, and thus they may provide correction to the prevailing majority opinion. And thus they may provide correction to the prevailing majority opinion. They may provide correction to the prevailing majority opinion. So that's the next important thing. He says here that, well, even if the minority is not 100% right, they can be perhaps partially right. Even the partial truth, well, will make us better. It can correct us. If there is inaccuracy in our opinion, majority, then they can correct us, they can make us better. For that reason also, let us not violate their liberty. Let them speak whatever they are speaking. Now, if you look at these two arguments, then both of these two arguments are very logical arguments. Any rational person will agree with Mill on these two grounds. Because in both of these cases, truth is actually, nobody can deny that truth is important. Truth is actually important than sometimes our sentiments. So we must seek the truth, you must try to know the truth, that is, nothing is bigger than that. So in both these points that we have talked about, Mill is, we can give some benefit of doubt to Mill. To these minorities. So offending minority, we can give them benefit of doubt that maybe they are true. But suppose, for example, if the minority is 100% wrong, there is no ground that they can be justified again, 100% proven that they are false, they are wrong, they are not true at all. Can we suppress their liberty because of the fact that they are wrong? Mill will say that no. Even if they are wrong, then also their liberty should not be restricted. And this is where the most important part of liberty will come. The most important argument in favor of all of that is the third one. Write down further. Even if the minority is wrong, then also they should not be suppressed, because even if the minority is wrong, then also they should not be suppressed, because they provide us with a contest of ideas, which prevents our views and opinions from hardening into dogma and prejudice. Which prevents our views and opinions and beliefs, which prevents our opinions and beliefs from hardening to become harder, hardening into dogma and prejudice. From hardening into dogma and prejudice. Now, that is the next important thing. The idea here is that he says that even if the minority is wrong, 100% wrong, then also they should not be suppressed. Now, before we talk about contest of ideas, let us talk about some general idea of liberty that people often forget to realize. That it's very important for us to realize that whenever we talk about liberty, then liberty always means two things. One we often recognize and the other we often fail to recognize. That creates lots of problem in our dealing with the liberty. So, liberty, whenever we talk about, liberty has two meanings. Liberty means liberty to be right, and liberty also means liberty to be wrong. So, liberty of course means liberty to be right, that we all have a right to be right. But suppose, for example, if I am wrong and I am okay being wrong, then, and if I am not forcing you to become wrong according to me, then I have a right to be wrong also. Liberty means right to be wrong as much as it means right. In fact, liberty, real test of liberty is to be wrong only. So, if you want to test liberty, that how much liberty you have, then be wrong and then see that what happens to you. So, in spite of being wrong, if nothing happens to you, then that is a true test of liberty. Being right is not a test of liberty. Real test of liberty is in being wrong. Now, about this particular thing, I remember one interesting, I will tell you one interesting anecdote. At the time when Mill was there, small story. Now, at the time when Mill was there in Britain, talking about liberty like this, and there was another great philosopher also was there in France, Voltaire. I hope all of you must have heard his name. Voltaire, was considered as perhaps the greatest philosopher and author of France in that age. He was often known as the intellectual father of the French Revolution. So, he was the person who created that intellectual background of French Revolution where the ideas of equality, liberty, etc. became the prominent idea. So, he was equally strong supporter of liberty. Now, when Voltaire was there in France, then there was another important philosopher also was there called Jean-Jacques Rousseau. I hope that you may have heard his name also, a famous philosopher of the Middle Age. Now, if you look at opinions of Voltaire and Rousseau, then they were totally opposite of each other. Voltaire, on the one hand, he believed in the Hobbesian idea that I talked about in the beginning of the class also to the answer to somebody. That Hobbesian idea was what? That man in a state of nature is brutish, selfish and so human beings are selfish and violent. So in a state of nature, we all keep on killing each other, harming each other, fighting with each other. So in a state of nature, we are all like beasts in a way. This idea that human beings are bad by nature, in philosophy we call that as the idea of brute savage. Idea of brute savage. Savage people are who? Savage people are the ones who live outside the state, into the state of nature, outside civilization. So people living in a non-state society, they are the brute people, they are savage people, like tribals today, or you can say before the civilization came into being in the historical period. So they are called savage people. Now he believed, Hobbes, that savage people are brutish people. So without a government, we keep on harming each other, killing each other, fighting with each other, and that will create life so bad that in a state of nature, life was solitary, poor, nasty, brutish and short. That was the idea of Hobbes. And how can you make a better life? Well, in order to lead a good life, we need a government sitting over us, the king, who can control our impulse, violence and selfishness. So only when there is a central authority like the government, then only we can live peacefully, otherwise peaceful life is impossible. So that is why he supported the social contract or the government or the monarch, etc., etc. Now Voltaire was a supporter of that idea. Voltaire also believed that, well, in order to lead a good life, we need a civilization, we need a government, we need a political system. Rousseau, on the other hand, had just opposite idea. Rousseau believed that no, savage people are not so bad. So people living in jungles, for example, Rousseau believed that people living in jungles, they are normally good people, nice people, loving people, compassionate people, empathic people, helping people, cooperative people. They don't fight, they help each other, they live peacefully and calm. This idea that savage people are good people, in philosophy we call that as the noble savage. Noble savage, savage people are noble, they are the good people. So what corrupts, what makes us bad? Well, civilization makes us bad. So if there is a government over us forcing us to do something, then because of that force, well, government force again, we become bad. We become, so civilization corrupts us. How can you make a better life? In order to lead a better life, we should go back to the state of nature. That was the Buddhist. So state of nature was a paradise, and we were thrown out of that paradise into the, well, hell of civilization. Into the hell of civilization. This is what. So in order to make a better life, we should go to that paradise. That was a state of nature. So their ideas were totally. So Voltaire was a supporter of this brute savage idea, and Rousseau proposed the idea of the noble savage. So they were totally opposite of each other in terms of their opinion, in terms of their understanding of the human nature and society. Now the story is that once it so happened that some critiques of Rousseau, now they can say in order to protest against his ideas, they burned some of his books in front of his house. Book burning was very common at that time. So some critiques of Rousseau, to protest against his ideas, they burnt his books in front of his own house with a threat maybe. Now when Voltaire came to know about that, then he wrote a letter, and in that letter he wrote a line, and this line became perhaps the most famous line ever written in the literature of liberty. And I hope all of you must have heard this quotation of Voltaire. So Voltaire wrote to Rousseau that, again I am quoting Voltaire, Voltaire wrote to Rousseau that I disagree with every single word that you say, but till my death I will defend your right to say so. Now that is an important thing. That is what liberty is all about. Idea is that he wrote to him that, well, I disagree with every single thing that your ideas are stupid idea. Your ideas are such a, well, bad idea, wrong idea. You are talking about noble savage. You are suggesting us to go back to the state of nature. You are trying to turn the clock back. It is a stupid idea. So I know that you are wrong. I know that you are idiotic. I know your ideas are stupid ideas. But even then, I will defend your right to say whatever you are saying. Liberty is that. Liberty does not mean that I have to agree with you. I know that you are wrong. Even then, I must defend your right to say so. So liberty does not mean that everybody has to accept each other. Everybody has to agree with each other. Liberty means even if we disagree, then we should respect our disagreement. Even if I think that you are wrong, then also I should respect your right to be wrong. And even if you think that I am wrong, then you should respect my right to be wrong. So liberty is not about being right and wrong. Liberty is more about respecting the right of the people to be right or to be wrong. That is the idea of liberty. And this is something that's very important that we need to understand in the recent time. Many modern controversy you can understand from this point of view. A few years ago in India, there was a controversy about Amir Khan controversy. Naseeruddin Shah also said a similar thing, creating similar controversy. Now, in one TV interview, Amir Khan had said that India is becoming more intolerant. Naseeruddin Shah also said that I am afraid for my children that how will they live in this India. So, India is becoming more intolerant. Now, after he made this statement on TV channel that India is becoming more intolerant, then a large number of people on social media, the trolls, we have a big troll army in India, bigger than the Indian army also. So these trolls have started trolling him badly, saying that, well, you have earned so much of money in India, you have earned so much of fame in India, so much of success in India, what right do you have to criticize India? If you don't like India, go to Pakistan, go to Syria, wherever you belong to. So now everybody started trolling him, threatening him that go to Pakistan, something like this. Now, irony of the whole situation was that those people who trolled Amir Khan so badly, they did not realize that by trolling him so badly, they had actually proved Amir Khan right, that India is actually becoming more intolerant. Because if you suppose had you to prove him wrong, what you should have done? You should have said, okay, I don't agree with Amir Khan, he is wrong, but let him say whatever he is saying. Well, had you said this, then you would have proved him wrong. So the idea that you don't have to agree with Amir Khan, you can say that, oh, he is wrong, I don't agree with him. But even then you must respect his right to say whatever he feels about his country. Don't throw him out, don't send him to Pakistan. That is the idea of liberty. So liberty does not mean that you have to agree with everybody. Liberty means that even if you think that the other person is wrong, then also you should defend that person's right to be wrong. That is what Mill will say about the liberty here. Now, next important thing is that these so-called wrong people. Remember, whenever I use the term wrong people, then I am always qualifying that with a so-called wrong people. And that is an important and deliberate word that I am using here. Why it is deliberately important? Well, it is important because nobody knows who is 100% wrong. Right and wrong is a very complicated thing. So, somebody who is right today can become wrong tomorrow, and what is wrong today can become right tomorrow. So, at one point of time, well, Church was right and Copernicus was wrong. And later on, Copernicus became right and Church became wrong. Later on, Copernicus also became wrong. Copernicus was not right. Sun is not the center of the universe. Sun is just a small star in some corner of a Milky Way, which is in some corner of the universe. So it is not the center of the universe. So Copernicus also became wrong after some point. At one point of time, Newton was right. Later on, Newton became wrong and Einstein became right. So right and wrong, nobody knows what is. So whenever you use the term wrong, then we should qualify that by saying that so-called wrong people. So these so-called wrong people, well, even they perform a very important function for us. What is the function that these so-called wrong people perform? Well, you know, I will tell you one interesting thing, that once I was driving somewhere, driving on the road in Delhi, and on some red light, my car was had stopped. In front of me, there was another car was there. In the back of that car, a very interesting line was written. The owner of the car had written there that I am not completely useless. That person, not me, I am useful. He wrote about himself perhaps that I am not completely useless, I can work as a bad example. Now, that is an interesting thing, that nobody in the world is a completely useless person. Even if that person is completely useless, then at least one use that person has, that, well, he can be a bad example. You can tell everybody else, don't be like him, he is such a bad person. That still is a use. So, even the wrong person has some use that you can tell others that, oh, he is wrong, don't be like him. So, nobody is completely useless. Everybody has a utility. Right and wrong, well, useful and useless. Well, jokes apart, idea is that what is the importance of these wrong people? Mill will say that these so-called wrong people perform a very important function in the society. What is the function of these so-called wrong people? Function of these wrong people is that these wrong people, first of all, when they say something, then they force us, they allow us to enter into a what he calls a contest of idea. Suppose, for example, if I am wrong and if I say something that you know that it is wrong, then what would you do in that case? Perhaps you will try to counter me, sir, you are wrong, I don't agree with you. Now, you try to counter me and I will try to counter you, there will be debate between us. This debate is called contest of ideas. Contest of ideas essentially means a debate or discussion, etc. So, these so-called wrong people force us to enter into a debate and discussion, and it is through this debate and discussion that truth actually emerges, comes out. Truth is not something that is given to us in a platter. It's not that some messiah will come to you and tell you, oh, this is truth, take it. No, truth does not come like that. Truth always comes out through a process. And what is that process? Well, that process is the contest of ideas. So, when right ideas and the wrong ideas, they contest with each other, then out of that contest, wrong idea is discarded, rejected, and the right ideas are accepted. It is through that process that, well, truth comes out. And in order for a contest of idea to happen, in order for a debate and discussion to happen, somebody has to be wrong. So just think of it. Suppose in this classroom all of us are right, then will there be any debate between us? Of course not. For any debate to happen, somebody has to be wrong. Either I am wrong or you are wrong, there will be a debate between us. So for any debate to happen, somebody has to be wrong. So these so-called wrong people, they allow us to enter into that contest of ideas where, well, that contest of idea where we can. So in a way you can say what we mean here is something like this, that these so-called wrong people, well, they allow us, the wrong people, what they do for us? They allow us two things. First one, they allow us to refine and reformulate our right ideas. That is one thing that the wrong people do. So again, take this similar example. Suppose you say something which is wrong, then, well, I have to counter you in that case. In order to counter you, I will try to refine my own idea, that what I believe in, which I think is right. I will try to reformulate that in a better language so that I can present to you, I can convince others that my ideas are right. So wrong people force us to think about our own ideas, that what do we stand for? Are we right or not? So it allows us to define, to reformulate, to make better our own idea. That is the first thing that they do. And second thing that they do is that they, the wrong people, they allow us to refute the wrong ideas. They allow us to refute the wrong ideas, prove the wrong ideas wrong. So these so-called, so in this case, and this is what he says, that so if you say something wrong, then I will try to refine my idea that will make me better, and I will try to counter your idea so that I can prove you that no, you are wrong and I am right. So this is how I will do. So he will say that wrong ideas can be killed only by refuting it. You cannot kill a wrong idea by suppressing it. Suppose, for example, you are wrong and I ask you, okay, please shut up, you are wrong, don't speak. Then do you think that your idea will die after that? No. Only thing that will happen is that your idea will go below the carpet, underground. And underground you will stop speaking, maybe because perhaps I am forcefully, well, forcing you not to speak. But just because I am forcing you not to speak does not mean that your idea will die. It will simply go underground, and underground it will keep on brewing up. And at one point of time, it will become slowly more and more rigid. This is where the dogma actually comes up. Dogma. What is the meaning of the term dogma? Now, dogma is the rigid belief, very rigid belief. Dogma is a rigid belief that does not allow its opposition to exist. So such belief is called dogmatic belief. Suppose, for example, in this classroom, if I say something and I ask all of you that anybody who disagree with me, well, leave the classroom. I don't want anyone, any such a student in my classroom who does not agree with me. If I say so, then my opinion becomes dogmatic opinion. I do not allow anybody to say anything against my opinion. So that will make my opinion dogmatic. Such opinion, such rigid opinion which does not allow the opposition to exist, such opinion is called dogmatic opinion. So Mill will say that if we do not allow the wrong people then to speak up, then their opinion and our as well will become more and more dogmatic. And that dogmatic opinion ultimately lead to the prejudice against the minority in the majority and against the majority in the minority. That prejudice will lead to the discrimination. That prejudice will lead to discrimination, which will finally lead to the, in a way, we can say, the imposition of the majority opinion, or rather, that discrimination will lead to the intolerance, imposition of the majority opinion on the minority, suppression of the minorities, or violence against them. So these all will result out of that dogmatic opinion that the majority and minority will have about their own thing. So he says that if we suppress the wrong opinion, then it will go underground, and underground it will keep on brewing up, and at one point of time it will burst as a violent outburst, and that will create a lots of problem in the society. So, you know, a few years ago there was a case being heard by the Supreme Court of India about freedom of speech, that Tukre gang wala case, the Bhima Koregaon wala case perhaps. In that judgment, well, the Justice Chandrachud, he was not the Chief Justice of India, today he is the Chief Justice of India, he was a judge in that bench. And he made used a phrase, that's a beautiful phrase that you can use in many of your answers about liberty. So he said in that judgment that dissent, that is what liberty is. Dissent is the safety valve of a democracy. Dissent is the safety valve of a democracy. Now this is a beautiful phrase. What is the purpose of a safety valve in a pressure cooker? Well, purpose of a safety valve is that if the pressure starts building up too high inside a cooker, then safety valve allows the pressure to be released in a peaceful manner. If you block the safety valve, what will happen? Well, pressure will keep on building up, and at one point of time it can blast as a explosion, and that can have a serious consequence. Many people may die, many accidents may happen because of that. So dissent is like that. Dissent allows our energy to be released in a peaceful manner. If you block the safety valve, dissent, liberty, then energy of the people will keep on brewing up inside them, and that will keep on agitating them. At one point of time, that pressure, that internal build up, well, will explode as a violent explosion. That will create lots of violence and threat in the society. This is what Mill will say. You know, there is a beautiful quotation of John F. Kennedy, the President of America at that time, you can say in the late 20th century. Now, Kennedy had said that if you make peaceful protest impossible, then you are making violent revolution inevitable. Now, that's the interesting thing. If you make peaceful protest impossible, if you do not allow the people to protest peacefully, that is liberty. So, if you do not allow the people to protest peacefully against the majority opinion maybe, well, then you are creating a condition where sooner or later, well, there will be a violent revolution. Because in absence of peaceful expression of the opinion, sometimes offensive also, well, the pressure will keep on building up, and that pressure can become so high at one point of time that it can lead to a big revolution in the society. So that is what Mill will say in that case. So in a way, what he is saying here, that in any society, well, the amount of violence, another important correlation we can draw now, amount of violence in society will be inversely proportional to the liberty that we have. So in any society, more is the liberty, less will be violent. If you suppress liberty, then sooner or later you are creating a condition for more and more violent revolution in the society. So if you want to reduce violence in society, respect liberty of everyone. Everybody, let people speak whatever they are about, even if they are speaking something which is offensive to that. Through that way, their energy will be released. Their energy will come out in that case. So this is what again say Mill will say. Liberty has that important function. So if you look at right and wrong that we talked about earlier, then this idea of liberty, that right and wrong we can say, is something that is one of the central aspect of how we define modernity. Let's talk a little about the modernity now. Modernity. I told you that Mill is, along with people like Immanuel Kant, is considered to be one of the founders of modernity. Philosophical founder of. Now, what is a modernity? If you look at from liberty point of view, how can you define modernity? Who is a modern person, modern society, modern constitution maybe? Now, if you compare the modern society with a pre-modern society, modern society with a pre-modern society, how can you differentiate the two? Let us talk about that. If you look at pre-modern society, that those society that is based on the principles before liberty, without liberty. So in France, for example, they were called ancien regime before French Revolution. French Revolution can say dismantled that ancien regime, ancient society, pre-modern society. Let's call that. Now, pre-modern society believed in an idea which we often call the idea of a single truth. Single truth. So, according to that idea, pre-modernity, in a way, that truth is only one. There is only one truth. And if anybody who does not agree with that truth is necessarily wrong. Suppose, for example, in this classroom we have 100 students are there. Suppose there are 100 different opinions are there. And suppose I am right. If I am right, then other 99 people in this classroom are necessarily wrong, because right is only one. If I am right, then anybody who does not agree with me will necessarily be wrong. So this is the idea of single truth. So pre-modern society believes one way to express that pre-modernity and singularity of the truth can be this also. Suppose, for example, this is our society. Suppose at the center of that society is the truth. Suppose I am A on this point, and suppose you are B on this point. Now suppose between me and you a lot of differences are there. I am here and you are here, that's far away from each other. Now if we are different from each other, then that simply means that both of us are perhaps wrong. We are ignorant, we don't know. Suppose, for example, I start gaining knowledge. If I start gaining knowledge, then I will come closer to the truth. Suppose you also start gaining the knowledge. If you start gaining the knowledge, then you will also come a little closer to the truth. Now, in this case, well, distance between us will become smaller. We become closer to each other. I gain more knowledge. You also gain more knowledge. Our difference will become still smaller still. We will come further close. And suppose I reach the truth and you also reach the truth, we will become same. So if both of us are knowledgeable, then both of us will become, because truth is only one. If there is a difference between us, then that is a sign of ignorance. So any difference between the people is necessarily a sign of ignorance, lack of knowledge, lack of truth. So truth is only one. That is the idea. Modernity, on the other hand, believes that there is nothing called single truth. There are multiple truths. There are multiple truths. So the truth is not only one. There are many truths that can exist. So suppose, for example, in this classroom, same example, in this classroom, suppose there are 100 people are there, and suppose there are 100 opinion, and suppose that I am right. Then just because I am right does not mean that other 99 are wrong. So other 99 can also be right. So there can be 100 truths. I may be right in my own way, and you may be right in your own way. So I should not try to, that is what is the idea of liberty, that I should not try to impose my opinion of right on you, and you should not try to impose your opinion of right on me. So Voltaire was also right maybe, and Rousseau maybe also. Rousseau thought that he was right and Voltaire thought that he was right. So let him be right in his own manner, let him be right in his own, rather than imposing each other's right on each other. You may be right that India is tolerant, and Amir Khan may also be right in his opinion that, well, India is not that tolerant. Let him have his own truth. Let us have our own truth. So this is the idea of the multiple truth. Each person has his own truth. There is nothing called single truth that everybody has to agree with. So if you look at this idea of multiplicity of the truth, then this idea Mill was talking about in 19th century. Think of it. Almost 2500 years before Mill, there was a great philosopher in India who talked about a similar idea of multiplicity of the truth. Can anybody tell me who that philosopher was? So, who that philosopher could be? Almost 2500 years before, 2400 years before John Stuart Mill. Well, there was a great philosopher in India who was talking about similar idea of multiplicity of the truth. I hope some of you may have figured him out. He was Mahavir, 24th Tirthankar of the Jains. So, those of you who are aware of the Jainism a little, then one of the fundamental principle of Jainism is that we call that as Anekantavad. Now, what is Anekantavad? Anekantavad simply says that there are multiple truths. Anek Ant. Ant means what? Truth. Truth is where our search stops. That is Ant, that is end. So, end is where we stop further search. So, and that is where the truth is, because after truth we don't have to know anything more. We have reached the final destination. So, Mahavir also said the same thing. Anekantavad also says the same thing. There are multiple truths are there. You cannot make a claim of the truth. So, different people have different truths in a way. Each one may be right in that case, even if they do not agree with each. There is a beautiful story in Jainism. I hope all of you must have heard about that. The story of an elephant and 7 blind men. So there are 7 blind men were there in a village. Now village of blind. Nobody knew that. So elephant came. Somebody said elephant has come, elephant has come. Nobody knew how elephant is. So 7 most wisest people from the village, they were asked, please go there and come with a report that how does elephant look. Now one person went, all the blind people, one person went there and he touched the leg of an elephant and he reported that elephant is like a pole. Somebody touched the trunk of the can say elephant and he reported elephant is like a snake. Somebody touched the teeth of an elephant and he reported that elephant is like a stick. Somebody touched the tummy of the elephant and he reported elephant is like a roof. Somebody touched the tail of the elephant and he reported that elephant is like a, you can say like a broom. Somebody touched the ear of an elephant and he reported that elephant is like a sieve, that sieving that we do in village and all. So 7 people gave the different account of how does elephant look at. Who was right in that case? Well, none of, or perhaps all of them in their own manner. Who was wrong in that case? None. So none was 100% right and none of them were 100% wrong. Each one had their own truth in that case. So what they saw, they reported. And that is true for them. What they did not see, they did not report. That is false for them. So this is what we call Anekantavad. There is a beautiful another doctrine also in Jainism. We call it as Shadvad. You must have heard about that. So Jain also says, Mahavir said that whenever you make a claim of truth, then you always should add a word shayad, perhaps with that. Do not never make an absolute claim over the truth. Nobody knows the absolute truth. So there is nothing called truth as such absolute. Every truth is a maybe type of thing, perhaps type. So whenever you make a claim of a truth, then add a word perhaps, shayad. That's why it is called shadvad, shayad. So only thing that I can say that perhaps I am right, maybe I am right, or maybe you are wrong. I cannot say that I am 100% right and you are 100% wrong. So if I touch the, can say legs of elephant, then I might possibly say that perhaps elephant looks like a pole. I should not make a claim that elephant is 100% like a pole. That will be wrong. Similarly, you can say if you say that if you look at the touch the teeth of an elephant, then you should not say that elephant is like a stick. You say that perhaps elephant is like a stick. So only claim that we can make is a maybe. We can never make an absolute claim over the truth. So this is what Mahavir. So Mahavir almost 2500 years before, well, Mill was talking about the similar idea. Mahavir strongly was tried to oppose both the Hindu and Bauddha dogma on the basis of these two principles of Anekantavad and Shadvad. Mill would have been very happy looking at the doctrine of Jainism. I don't know whether he was aware of that or not, but this is what liberty is. So there is no single truth, there are multiple truths. Let people discover their own truth and allow them to have. So as long as they are not imposing their truth on us. So everybody has his own truth and every truth deserves respect. We should try to respect that. So that is the idea of the liberty. In this sense, you can see finally that this idea of liberty that we are talking about, liberty is something that subsumes things like, you can say, multiplicity of the truth or plurality of the truth. There is no singularity of the truth. Or liberty also talks about things like diversity. Liberty always promotes diversity. Everybody does not have to be similar to each other. We can be diverse people and diversity must be celebrated. We should never try to impose uniformity in the society. Everybody should be same. And liberty also means the tolerance. Tolerance is a very important value of liberty. Tolerance means what? Tolerance simply means, suppose for example, I don't like you, your opinion, your belief, your rituals, anything. Then also I must tolerate your presence around me because it is your liberty. And even if you do not like me, then also you must tolerate my presence around you. That is the importance. Each one of us, without necessarily liking each other, we should tolerate each other. So acceptance is not what liberty is talking about. I don't have to accept your opinion. I don't have to, you can say, you don't have to accept my opinion. We can reject each other's opinion. We can say that to each other that you are wrong. We can disagree with each other, but even then you must tolerate each other. So tolerance is more important, acceptance is not. We don't have to accept the opinion of Amir Khan, but you must tolerate his opinion. That is what liberty is all about. So liberty talks about at minimum level that at least you must tolerate each other. Even if you don't like each other, even if you don't accept each other's opinion as right and all. So that is the idea of liberty that Mill is talking about. This is the importance of the contest of idea. Contest of ideas allows us to find multiple truths. So that is the beauty of this thing again. If you, let us take some, I think 2 or 3 questions are there. Oh, many messages, right? There is a question, sir, in recent past in a TV show, somebody said something about Lord Shiva, and in retaliation, Nupur Sharma said something about Prophet Muhammad. After that, a lot of communal violence occurred in our country. Nupur Sharma got death threats. When Nupur Sharma went to Supreme Court, the judges blamed only Nupur Sharma for communal violence. What was ethical action? Was that ethical action by SC as per John Stuart Mill? Well, about SC, I will not say that will be contempt of court maybe, but John Stuart Mill will say that both of them were equally right. So problem in this case was that in India we are creating a type of, you can say, culture of intolerance. So both of, so I have a right to criticize, you can say, say negative things about Lord Shiva also and Prophet Muhammad also. So, and both of their liberty must be protected. The problem was that since we are not protecting liberty of some people, then we do not have the moral authority to demand the protection of others. So, according to you can say John Stuart Mill, both of them had the right to. So, one person has a right to criticize Shiva also, and other person has a right to criticize Prophet Muhammad also. That society must protect both of them, or government must protect both of them. That is what will be the stand of John Stuart Mill. Next question, Braja. Hate speeches are dealt under IPC under section 153, 153B that declares that word spoken or written that promotes disharmony, hatred or insult on the basis of religion, ethnicity, culture is punishable under law. According to Mill, he did not harm anybody. Why is it punishable, Braja? That's why we are not discussing law in our class, we are discussing ethics. So, law may not be based on only ethical principle of John Stuart Mill, isn't it? But if you believe in John Stuart Mill, then any such law will be a problem. So, hatred and disharmony, etc. So, only thing that should be prohibited according to law, by law according to Mill, is the direct harm or a threat of harm maybe. So, my liberty should be protected only when I threaten you that I am going to harm you. Then perhaps my liberty can be protected. But otherwise, well, liberty should not be restricted. This is what Mill's opinion will be. Is Mill's considered liberty absolute liberty? Not absolute liberty. So, absolute liberty we will talk about in next topic. In some cases, remember, Mill was a utilitarian. So, for him, liberty was a rule, and rule can have an exception sometimes. So, in Mill's theory, liberty can have an exception sometimes. We will talk about that also in the next class. Mandeep, sir, if someone has Mill's liberty, then should derogatory statement be blatantly ignored? 100%. So, ignore the derogatory statement or make derogatory statement or yourself if you want to engage in a verbal duet with that person with that much of energy and motivation then. Next question, perhaps Om. Sir, recently few people in Sweden had burnt and disrespected the Holy Quran, and Sweden judiciary and police supported this act by providing legal backing. And according to Bentham's utilitarianism is this fact can be justified, as in return there is a lot of violence took place in return. It is not true that utilitarianism will give absolutism to every fundamental right which our constitution restricts by applying. No, right they do not talk about. Fundamental right, etc. we'll talk about in a later class, maybe tomorrow or the Monday maybe. So, but yes, according to John Stuart Mill, protecting those people who disrespected Holy Quran was a correct thing to do. So, according to Mill, well, that disrespect is a part of liberty. We all have a right to disrespect something or the other. That's why I told you, tolerance is important, respect is not. So, we don't have to, we have no obligation to respect anybody or anything for that matter. We have only obligation to respect the right of somebody, isn't it? So, if the Swedish government I don't know about these cases maybe, but the Swedish government protecting the right was the justified thing to do. This is what Mill will say. But it is not a fundamental right. They do not talk about the fundamental right. Let's not go into that. We'll talk about fundamental right in a later class, tomorrow or the Monday maybe. Next one, can we count the practice of triple talaq as liberty of minority, though it is very unfair and regressive in nature? Sujit. Though about triple talaq we will talk about in tomorrow's class in more detail, similar things like triple talaq. But according to this, who is to say that it is unfair and regressive? Are you in a position to say that everything? So if some people are doing it, are they stupid people? Let them decide. If you think that it is regressive, Mill will say, if you think that it is regressive, don't do that. Tell others that it is regressive. But forcing somebody for that will be wrong. But we will talk about that, such similar cases in later class, maybe tomorrow's class. Next question, Shubhankar. Sir, how do we know that people are wrong and they are saying right? People are not wrong, only what they are saying can be right and wrong. Isn't it? So you should differentiate between the people. How can you say the people is wrong? Their opinion may be wrong, people cannot be wrong and right. Right and wrong is always about what we do. So that is one qualification that you have to say. As far as what is right and wrong, then that can be done only through the contest of idea, debate and discussion. That's what we are focusing so much on, debate and discussion in this topic here. Next question, Biswajit. Sir, who are protect Amir? Well, write correct sentence, Biswajit. Who are protect? It is meaningless sentence, it does appear. Who are protect means what? Who are protect is grammatically incorrect. Meaning wise also it is a little unclear. So write correct grammatically sentence, full sentence. Who are protect Amir Khan, that is their liberty, is not. Well, frame this question better and write again. I do not like to respond to the question which is unclear. So frame this question better and write this question again, we can take it up. So that is the third one. And then after last, one more thing we will talk about, write down further, fourth one. So that is all about the contest of idea or the things like that. Fourth one, write down. A society that suppresses dissent, falls into that stultifying conformity which removes all the energy and vitality, which is so important for change and progress. Which is so important for change and progress. Which is so important for change and progress. Now, that is the next important thing that we will talk about. The idea here is that he says that a society that kills dissent, that does not allow dissent to happen, that does not allow the minority to speak against the majority, well, that society falls into that stultifying conformity. Sir, who were protecting Amir Khan, that was their liberty. Is that who were protecting Amir Khan that was their liberty. Who was protecting Amir Khan? Well, government has to protect Amir Khan. I don't know what exactly you mean by this question also. But well, it is the duty of the government to protect everybody's liberty, including Amir Khan's liberty. That is what this theory will say. Oh, protesting, do you mean protesting? if well, Viswajit, we are not very clear in your question. I am not able to make up a. Is it protesting? So, do you mean to say that who were protesting Amir Khan was that their liberty? If this is your question, again you should be more clear about the words. If that is your question, then Mill will say yes to protest Amir Khan, but to threaten him and ask him to go to Pakistan, that is wrong. So, protest should be only that, okay, I don't agree with Amir Khan is wrong, that you can say with equal strength, equal vehemence and all. That is your liberty. But to threaten him and ask him to go to Pakistan would be wrong. That is force. You are forcing him to leave his property or leave his country. That is, you are creating a fear in him. That is wrong. So, that is something that should be protested. So, protesting, I think this is what you might have meant. Now, stultifying, he says here further that society that kills dissent, that does not allow the dissent to happen, that society falls into that stultifying. Stultifying means what? A stone-like. A stone-like, something that like a stone. What is the characteristics of a stone? Well, stones are those things that do not change. So, you put a stone at one place, then it can remain in the same position, shape and size for maybe millions of years. So, such a society will remain same position, same shape, no change happen, conformity. Conformity also we will talk about in some later class, there is a whole topic of conformity. But here we can simply mean that conformity is that process in which two different people become similar to each other. So, that different people becoming similar to each other by some process is called conformity. Detail of that we will discuss in some later class. So, he says here that society that does not allow dissent to happen, then more and more that society becomes more and more conforming society, uniform society, diversity is killed there and nothing new happens. So, such a society is deprived of all the energy and vitality, because which is necessary for social change. You know that any change requires energy, even physical change requires energy, as you know, social change also requires social energy. So, Mill will say here that for any change to happen we need some energy, and from where that energy comes up, that energy always comes from the liberty. Liberty is the source of that energy which ultimately creates social change. So, if we do not have liberty, then well, society will become, there won't be any energy left in the society, that ultimately will remove all the change, possibility of change. That society will become a dead society. No progress can happen there, no development can happen there, no growth can happen there. So, now he is making a second type of proposition, if you call it, that in any society the progress and development is directly proportional to the amount of liberty that the society has. So, more liberty that society has, more. So, liberty not only reduces the violence in the society, but liberty also increases the progress and development of the society. In any society you can see where the liberty has been high, you see that progress has always been much faster there, development has been much faster there. If you take historical example, you know, at the time, look at in the ancient India, for example, that when Ashoka was there, during Ashoka's time, well, liberty was very high. You must be aware this type of liberty that we are talking about. Remember, that was the age where liberty was very much, well, there in India. So, that was the time when Ashoka became Bodh after Kalinga war. Then he did not force anybody to, become Bodh. So, he allowed everybody in India to follow their religion or their. So, any progress and development that, so that was the time we can see when a lot of liberty was there. He allowed everybody to follow, well, their religion, Hindus and Jains and Ajivikas, etc., etc. And because of that, one of the important reason that was the time when Indian economy was one of the largest in the world. According to some historians, during Ashoka's time, well, Indian economy was 1/3 of the world economy, 33%. So, anywhere you can see in today's time also, you look at America, for example, well, most developed nation in the world, well, liberty is very high there. So, any society where you can see where the development is very fast paced, then liberty is normally much higher there. So liberty not only creates a more peaceful condition, less violent society, it also makes more progressive, more developed society also. For the sake of peace, harmony, and for the sake of progress and development, let us allow liberty. Let us not restrict liberty of somebody, anybody in that case. So that is what, these are the 4 important advantages of liberty that Mill was talking about. So this is the idea of liberty. That is the reason for which he said that liberty should never be restricted. Everybody's liberty, however offensive, however wrong that person may possibly be. Let us protect everybody's liberty, right and wrong, offensive or not so offensive, whoever that person is. Everybody's liberty should be always respected. So this is how he will talk about the liberty. Second, the most important contribution of John Stuart Mill in the moral philosophy. So that is the second important part. Now, finally, we will talk about the third important contribution of John Stuart Mill in the moral philosophy. Another important one, not as important as liberty, but nevertheless an important one. So write down third one. Higher and the lower pleasure. Higher and the lower pleasure. Now, before we talk about this idea of higher and lower pleasure of Mill, let us talk about a little, go back to Bentham's idea once again. Bentham's ideas once again. As we have seen earlier that Bentham said that happiness is very important. But happiness is something that does not come to us in a platter. Somebody does not come to you and take you, oh, this is happiness, take it. No, happiness always comes through a process. And what is that process? We perform some action. We do something and that creates happiness for us. Now, and different people do different things to get happiness. Suppose, for example, as I told you some example like this one, that it may be, I may get more happiness in reading a book of philosophy. My daughter may get more happiness in watching a cartoon. Some people may get more happiness in, well, going to Mount Everest. Some people may get happiness in riding a bike at a dangerously high speed. So different people get happiness in different things. Some people may get happiness in playing cricket or singing a song, whatever. So different people get happiness in different things. Now the question is that if we have to make a comparison between the two, then which of the two is more important morally speaking, action or the happiness produced by that? Now Bentham will say that, well, happiness is important, actions are not. So actions are not important, happiness is only important. So anything that creates happiness makes action morally justified. Now that creates a little trouble for us sometimes, because there are people, as we have seen, who get happiness in such things like reading a book also, and you can say philosophy also, and music also. And there are some people who get happiness in, say, watching a Christian being killed by a hungry lion in that Roman Colosseum that we talked about yesterday. So now that may not be possible today. Today we can say we cannot have such example, we cannot kill somebody for the sake of entertainment, but we can have similar examples that today also there are many people who get lots of happiness in what we can call bullfighting, for example, bullfighting or the dog fighting or cockfighting, or I personally put even WWE into that category. So a lot of cruelty is there, at least in bullfighting and all, you know, Jallikattu. So a lot of you can say violence is there, a lot of cruelty is there, a lot of screaming, shouting, and sometimes animals also die, sometimes human beings also die. But it is a great entertainment activity, people enjoy it a lot. So people get happiness in that also, and people get happiness even in things like, say, listening to a music of, say, Beethoven or Ravi Shankar, Ustad Bismillah Khan, or you can see this reading literature of, say, Shakespeare or the Kalidas, whatever you can say. So people get happiness in that also. So now the question here is that this happiness and that happiness, can we compare both of them? Can you say that both of them are same by nature? What do you think Bentham will say? Bentham will say, yes, both of them are same by nature. Well, there is a difference between them, but what is the difference? Difference is that just that of quantity, just that of number. So this may be 1 in number maybe, and that may be 1000 in number, 1 million in number maybe, but that nevertheless it is just about a number. So a Bentham will say that if you increase this to a very high level, then it might become equivalent to that. And if you reduce that to a very low level, then that also might become equivalent to that. Both of them are equivalent, both of them are interchangeable, they are comparable, they occur on a similar, same scale. So this is what Bentham will say, but perhaps many of us may not agree with that formulation of Bentham. Mill also did not agree with that. So this is where the concept of higher and the lower pleasure comes up. So write down further. According to Mill, there are two types of happiness. According to Mill, there are two types of happiness called the higher and the lower pleasure. There are two types of happiness called the higher and the lower pleasure, which are qualitatively different from each other, and thus they cannot be compared. Which are qualitatively different from each other, and thus they cannot be compared. So this is what he will say. Now Mill is saying here that now there are two types of happiness, not only one happiness that Bentham talked about. So there are two types of happiness which he called the higher pleasure and the lower pleasure. And he said that the higher pleasure and lower pleasure are different from each other. Well, not in terms of quantity, it's not the question of 1000 or 1. They are different from each other in terms of their quality. They are qualitatively different, so that they can never be compared. However high this becomes, it can never be equivalent to that. And however low that becomes, that can never be equivalent to this. Both of them are qualitative. The difference between them is more like the difference of time and length. You cannot compare time with length. You cannot compare higher pleasure with the lower pleasure. They occur on two scales. They do not occur on a single scale where comparison is possible. So that is how higher and lower pleasures differ. Now what is the difference between the two? Write down further. Lower pleasure is the pleasure of body, and it involves satisfaction of the lower pleasure is the pleasure of body, and it involves the satisfaction of the sense organs. It involves the satisfaction of the sense organs. Write down further. It does not require any practice or experience. It does not require any practice or experience in order to be enjoyed. It does not require any practice or experience in order to be enjoyed. It may become, one more line, it may become pain also. It may become pain also if it is oversatisfied. If it is oversatisfied. Now these are the qualities of characteristics of the lower pleasure according to him. Lower pleasure, as we have seen here, is the pleasure according to him, it is the pleasure of the body. And when he says body, then he means the satisfaction of the sense organs. So it is the type of happiness that people get when they satisfy their need of hunger, thirst, sex. These are the bodily pleasure. And he said that these are the pleasures that in order to enjoy them, we do not need a practice or experience. In order to enjoy tasty food, for example, you do not have to attend a classroom where a teacher can give you lectures on how to enjoy tasty food. In order to enjoy tasty food, you do not have to attend a class. You can say enjoy the drink, for example, you don't have to attend a classroom. So in this case, you eat a food and you enjoy it. No practice is required, no experience is required, no training is required. So anybody can enjoy it just by having it, just by being exposed to it. And it can become pain also if it is over satisfied. You must have seen that also it changes its character. You must have seen, for example, suppose one day you are very hungry. Now you go to one of your friend's house and that person gives you a lot of, you can say, tasty food and all. You start eating, you enjoy it so much, it is such a tasty food. After half an hour, suppose your tummy is full and that person keeps on pressurizing you one more rasgulla or one more sandesh, for example, then, well, same thing you see that there was a pleasure to eat a few half an hour earlier will become pain even to look at it. So pleasure has become pain because over satisfaction has been there. Pain can become pleasure also if there is an under satisfaction. They change their character, they change their nature. That is the characteristics of the lower pleasure. On the other hand, write down further, higher pleasure is the pleasure of mind. Higher pleasure is the pleasure of mind, is the happiness of mind, is the pleasure of mind, and it involves thought, imagination or emotions. And it involves thought, imagination and emotions. It is the happiness that we get in, some personal achievement, is the happiness that we get in some personal achievement, or some big innovation, or some significant civilizational advancements, or some significant civilizational advancements, or some great cultural pursuit, etc. Or some great cultural pursuit, etc. It requires, write down further, it requires training and it requires practice and experience. It requires practice and experience in order to be enjoyed. It requires practice and experience in order to be enjoyed. And finally, it is always pleasurable. It is always pleasurable. It is always pleasurable. So these are the characteristics of the higher pleasure according to him. So higher pleasure is, on the other hand, as against the lower one, it is the pleasure of the mind. And when we say mind, then we mean these three things: thought, imagination and emotion. So he said that this is the pleasure that we get in some great personal achievements. Just suppose, for example, that you can get happiness even today by eating a tasty food, or you can say bunking the classroom and walking around outside watching a film, etc. And you can make a lot of sacrifice today, work very hard and clear the UPSC exam and see your name in the merit list there. Then also you will get happiness. Now can we compare that happiness with this happiness that you can get by eating a tasty food today? Well, Mill will say that you can never compare the two. That will be happiness of higher pleasure. You can never compare that with the lower pleasure that you can get today by eating a tasty food. So there is some great personal achievement like clearing the UPSC exam, or some great cultural pursuit like, for example, listening to the music of these things. I can say music of Beethoven, for example, or Shakespeare, reading that. So these are something that gives us higher pleasure according to them. And he says further that higher pleasure is the one that requires some practice and experience in order to be enjoyed. Have you ever, anybody, have you read the book of Shakespeare, original book of Shakespeare? If you read the book of Shakespeare for the first time, original book, then you may realize that it appears to be a very boring thing again, literature, again, very old English, thou art, something like this one. So it's very boring initially. But if you suppose first time you read, it will be very boring. But suppose you keep on reading it and you enjoy, attend a classroom, for example, where a teacher of Shakespeare, an expert on Shakespeare, can give you lectures on Shakespeare, listen to some lectures, read some commentary on Shakespeare and all. Maybe 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, you get some training. Then after, perhaps you will start understanding the beauty of his language. And once you can understand, start enjoying that, then after you will understand that Shakespeare's literature is the greatest literature perhaps ever written in English language. Now, in order to enjoy Shakespeare, you have to work very hard. You may have to attend a course, a classroom, many books and all. On the other hand, in order to enjoy Chetan Bhagat, well, you don't have to attend a classroom or, well, you can say the lectures and all. You can simply read it and you enjoy it. Similarly, have you heard those of you who enjoy the higher pleasure, you can say this classical music like Beethoven, etc. You must have realized that first time when you listen to the classical music, then it will appear to be very, you can say, boring again, very, you can say, unenjoyable. That we start, you can say, get some training, enjoy some, you can say, attend some music class where some musician can give you some training. You start slowly understanding the intricacies of the sound. And once you can enjoy that, then you will start enjoying it, then you will find that when you listen to such classical music, then you find yourself in some other world itself. Some other world, some other, well, emotional state yourself. On the other hand, if you listen to the music of, say, people like Yo-Yo Honey Singh or somebody, then you will see that is my personal experience is there. When you listen to such music, then, well, it will activate your body. You feel like jumping, dancing, shouting, screaming, fighting, etc. But your mind becomes numb. But when you listen to that music, then your mind becomes more active and your body becomes quiet. You feel calm and quiet in that case. So what activates your mind is the higher pleasure. What activates your body is the lower pleasure. This is what Mill will say in that case. So these are the two types of pleasure. They cannot be compared. They cannot be put on a single scale. Now, next important question is that how can you differentiate between these two pleasures? That which is higher, and how do you know that which pleasure is higher and which pleasure is lower? We'll talk about that after the break. Let me see if there is another question or not. So, no more question. So, we'll talk about that after the break.